In this installment of Back to Basics, we're going to talk about the dreaded wiring that everybody hates. So, let's go. Hi, I'm Tom Kovichak, and this is Tom's Trains and Things. This channel was created to help other modelers who are in need of guidance in pursuing their dream of building a model railroad. I recently did a poll on a live stream asking the question, what's the most dreaded task while working on your model railroad? Now, I came up with two that came out tied, actually, and one of them was wiring. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about both DC and DCC because basically you wire it the same way. You have two wires. You're starting out with two wires. In DC, you have a plus and a minus. And the reason you have a plus and a minus is so you maintain consistency on the track. But when you hit reverse, that plus and minus reverses. So we're not going to get into that right now, but this is just plus and minus in DC. And on DCC, you have track A and track B. And that's the same thing. You just want to keep the wires consistent all the way through on the track. Unless you're having a reversing section, and that's beyond the scope of this right here. But we're going to talk about the two wires that we hook up. And you're going to need a bus wire. And that is a heavier wire going from either your command station or your transformer to take the power through your module or your layout. And from there, you want feeder wires that are of smaller diameter going up to your track. I'm going to show you both the bus wire and the feeder wires here. I soldered some feeder wires on the track, and I have some underneath, and we'll see it right here. This is the wires that I stripped, or I cut. I have to tin these wires, and they are going to be my feeders, and they are going to be on my relays, which are underneath the layout. They will be going from these connectors right here, which is my bus wire, to these relays right here to power the frogs. And you ask why I use these connectors instead of Wago. I get that a lot. Well, because I could get 25 to 50 of these for the price of 2 Wagos. And if you lived in my area, you would see Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace. They are not available within 100 miles, and I'm not going to pay Amazon twice as much what they are actually worth. So I'll stick with these. I bought these years ago. I still have plenty of them left. And here's the bus wire that I do the connection in between the two modules. And right over here is the feeder for the 3 tracks. I used 14 gauge Romex that I stripped, and I'm using the black and white, and I'm using 22 gauge stranded wire. The stranded wire is available on Amazon through Remington. It's about $16 for a 100-foot roll of each color. I'm using black and red, and black and white on the Romex because that's what Romex comes with, black and white. I've done several videos on wiring on both DC and DCC in some of my older videos, and I'll put the most relevant one up here so you could see what I'm talking about. There are various charts of recommended minimum wire size, both on NMRA website and the DCC wiki. You may have something similar to this if you are planning on powering your frogs. This is an Arduino before and after I wired the feeders from the bus wires. I twisted 4 of the red and 4 of the black together and then tinned them again before I placed them in the connector. This makes it a lot easier to push them in and pull them out if you ever need to change anything. It may look like strings of spaghetti, but this is what the wire looks like before I twisted them all together and tinned them and place them in the connector, and then put them in the appropriate places on the relays. The same thing can be done when you have several parallel tracks, as you've seen in part of the video earlier. This is an example of the bend I place on the wire after I tin it and before I solder it to the track. You can see it holds there in place, so I don't have to hold it. I could have one hand on the soldering iron and one hand on the solder to make it a lot easier to solder it in place. Here is the same view after I soldered it, but before I cleaned it up. I usually use 91% alcohol and a stiff brush to remove the excess flux from the working area. You can see that the ties and the little tabs are not melted, so it takes some finessing to do it, but with a good digital soldering iron, it can be done very easily. As you can see in this next photo, you can even solder on a used piece of track where there is still ballast everywhere. All you have to do is clean the rail right where you want to do your soldering. This is a view from the opposite side of the rails where you cannot see while you're soldering. It still can be done. It takes practice, but practice makes perfect. You have to just keep on doing it until you're able to do it just like this. I'm surprised no one mentioned soldering as being the most difficult task when they're doing their model railroad. Once the ballast is laid down, you'll not be able to see where the wires are on the rails. That's what makes it so good about soldering on there with a very small piece of wire and the way that I bend it. We're going to take a look at a couple of short clips of me soldering two of the rails. Now, it's a little bit blurred, and that's why I'm not making it very long, so it's kind of hard to video in that position with a webcam because the webcam always wants to change its focus constantly. Before I did any soldering on the rails, I took a small file and cleaned the area of the rail that I planned on doing the soldering on. That keeps it clean and keeps all the debris away from the area. I use 6040 rosin core solder, 32 thousandths, and liquid flux that is available on my Amazon page. Everything in this video is available on my Amazon page also. I use a small applicator to apply the flux to the area that I want to solder. I use a Kisger digital soldering station, and I found that 650 degrees Fahrenheit is the optimal temperature to do soldering on the track and on most of the wires with this rosin core solder. For more information on soldering feeders and soldering in general, check out my playlist on soldering. There's many videos on there where you could learn how to solder. As I said earlier in this video, you can go to the NMRA webpage or the DCC wiki to find out more about the bus wire sizes and the feeder wire sizes, along with the spacing of the feeders. It also gives you a chart showing you what these values are in each scale. Now, you could go on Facebook and ask questions, or in the users groups, and you'll get all kind of different answers. And a lot of people will tell you you don't have to put feeders everywhere like they tell you. They do fine, or you don't have to solder your joints or anything like that. Don't believe them. Go to where the experts are, NMRA and the DCC wiki, for your information. Or if you have any questions, send me an email and I'll be glad to help you. And if I can't help you, I'll point you in the right direction of where you can get the information that you need. Wiring may seem like a hard task for you, but basically all it is two wires. All you have to remember is to keep the same potential wire on the same track. And an easy way to do that is, if you're just doing around the wall or in a big circle, put your black wire on the outside and the red wire on the inside. But if you're doing like dog bones and M-shaped model railroads where your track goes in different directions, get yourself an old piece of rolling stock and paint half of it red and half of it black and run it along the rail as you're doing your wiring. You'll be able to tell where to put your black wire and the red wire for the feeders. And remember, your bus wire can be just one black and one white running along the length of your model railroad. You don't have to go all over the place with it. Your feeders can be as long as 24 inches long. So like I said, it's easy. Just take your time with it, and remember that it's just 2 wires that you're running on the tracks. 1 wire on one track and 1 wire on the other track. You keep that in mind and you can't go wrong with it. Block detection, signaling, and districts require a little bit more wiring and a little bit more thought, and that will be discussed in other videos. So until the next time, we'll see you.